Hey everyone, today we're going to be talking about diagnosing different plant nutrient deficiencies. So I've been growing different types of plants for a pretty long time now. And the one thing I can say for sure is diagnosing nutrient deficiencies can be one of the most challenging things to do in growing plants. Most of the time you're simply guessing, but there are a few telltale signs of what exactly is going on. But first we need to cover some of the basics. Like all living things, plants need nutrients. These can be broken into macronutrients and micronutrients. They're mostly ones you've seen on the periodic table in 7th grade, things like nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, and then some of the micronutrients are things like iron, boron. The main thing you need to know are the 3 numbers on your fertilizer bag or bottle, which are nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. And quickly, those pretty much grow leaves, elongate the shoots. The middle number, phosphorus, pretty much does fruit development and flowering. That's why we don't really use them in the aroid community. And then the final number is kind of whole plant functions and a bit of rooting. And we're going to mostly focus on those macronutrients. The 3 primary nutrients, those ones on the bag, those are mobile nutrients. So essentially all that means is that they're able to be moved throughout the plant. So the best way to diagnose a nutrient deficiency, the most common ones are things like nitrogen deficiency. And this Monstera albo is a great example of that. So we have the newest leaf here, which is beautiful and doing great. And that's always the best indicator of plant health and nutrition, is go to the newest brand new shoot, brand new leaf, and look at it and see if it's doing well. Does it have any tip burn at the end? That's a sign of too much nitrogen, too much nutrition, too much salts in the media. But if this leaf is happy, you're pretty much doing a great job. And now if you see something yellowing and some tip burn like this, yellowing at the edges going in, and it happens to be the oldest leaf on the plant, those mobile nutrients are going to be transported, that nitrogen is going to be transported to provide for this new leaf, because the plant is prioritizing this new leaf instead of this old leaf. And this can happen with nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, those main primary macronutrients. Now I've ran into this a lot recently because I changed my LED lights to these very powerful 1000-watt lights that contain a lot of red in them. It's really stripping out the nitrogen out of my plants, and they were really close. So I'm still working on dialing that in. But the thing you need to keep in mind is that as you scale light, photosynthesis will scale also. So you'll need to scale the amount that you're watering your plants as well as the amount of nutrition you're providing for your plants. And the best piece of advice I can give you is that to just always go back to the basics. Go back to something that you know. Set the light at an appropriate height. Set the dimmer or the amount to the appropriate amount that you're comfortable with, not too bright. And then you're going to set the media nutrition to something that you know. Oftentimes the fertilizer manufacturer, I use Osmocote. It's these little pebbles that you see on top. A lot of commercial nurseries and growers use them. I wasn't using enough, so I finally did the calculation of what this 4-inch pot needs, and it's essentially like a spoonful, and I just wasn't putting enough. And then I blasted these plants with this huge amount of light, and some bleaching is occurring. That's what you're seeing, that liming of the leaf, but that's pretty classical nitrogen deficiency. And guess what happened? I added a bit more nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, and these plants started growing better all of a sudden. Though this yellowing and chlorosis you're seeing here isn't going to ever fix itself, immediately the new growth started growing faster and looked healthier. That's another thing to keep in mind, is these older leaves that are damaged, they're never going to fix themselves. They're never going to heal or get better. That's why you always want to look to that newest growth point to see how you're really doing as an indicator of just the plant's overall health. That's what I'll always go to when I see a new plant or see someone's plant. I'll just look to see if it's growing, to see if it's putting out a healthy leaf, or to see if it, is it deformed? Does it have any sort of browning? Is that tip browned? That's another thing also. If you overwater or underwater, you're not allowing your plant to uptake the right amount of nutrients. Obviously, if you underwater, you're going to see a lot of nitrogen deficiency, and that lowest leaf is going to yellow off because you're not giving the plant water to transport that nutrient up to the leaves that it needs. So it's just going to eat closely from here, from this lowest leaf, to provide for that newest growth point. But again, here, newest growth point is healthy and happy. It's worth talking about nitrogen toxicity. So this is a Radicans luxurians. It has a typically very dark leaf, but this is kind of what nitrogen toxicity presents itself as. Very dark leaves, although this is typical of this plant variety, but it's a great way to show that like green-black that comes across in nitrogen toxicity. And again, you will look for a little bit of nutrient burn on the leaf tip. But again, go to that newest growth point, super healthy, no issues on the leaf, and you go around and you see the oldest leaves are being eaten effectively by the plant. You see those here. So although you can go into magnesium deficiency, calcium deficiency, and you can absolutely go crazy with trying to diagnose exactly what's wrong with your plant, just go back to something you know, a LECA concentration that you know of, and a light level that matches that. So whenever I'm in a low light space, I always feed less food, the plant grows slower. And it's worth also going over pH here briefly. We're not going to go too crazy into it. pH is simply a scale of acidity versus alkalinity. Most soils prefer around 7, but each plant prefers specific pHs, and depending on whether you're in cocoa or peat or hydroponics or typical soil, those nutrients that are in your soil will only be uptaken at a certain pH level. At other pH levels that are too low or too high, certain nutrients will be actually locked out. So no matter how much fertilizer you put in, you won't actually be able to see that in the plant because the pH is off. Soil is much more forgiving than something like LECA or in hydroponics where you have to keep the pH pretty spot on, and if it kind of swings on either side, you'll start seeing different nutrient lockouts and things like that. But by far the most common one I see is nitrogen deficiency. And remember that most commercial chemical fertilizers like Osmocote that are not organic, they have to be applied very carefully because you can burn your plants and give them too much of this fertilizer, because essentially it's a salt. So it can burn the plant and burn the leaves, and it's also going to kill off the microbiology in your soil. Organic fertilizers are able to be broken down over time and slowly by the microbiology in your soil. So it'll be slowly released to your plant over time. That's essentially the difference between all these plants, is this plant is being fed organically with one of our soils, and then these are in our 3-2-1 aeroid mix that I've talked about, plus a little bit of that Osmocote. It's a 3-1-2 NPK. That's what I really prefer. 3 for the leaves, that 1 because we're not fruiting or flowering, so we don't need much of 1, but it does provide for some roots, and then that potassium, that third number, is going to provide for the whole plant function. Pinning down an exact nutrient deficiency or toxicity is very possible, but you might just go crazy doing it. Trust me, I've done it. I've gone too high, I've gone too low, but the best thing I always do is just reset the media, go into a concentration of solution or fertilizer that I know works, read the manufacturer's suggestion, maybe go slightly under that, and then use that level as a starting point with a fair amount of light, maybe a windowsill or something reasonable that that plant is used to, and that you know. It does take a little bit of time and practice and experience, but you'll get the hang of it. And I really appreciate you guys taking the time to watch this video. I'm sorry I'm at my house and not in the greenhouse. It's a much different backdrop, but I'll be back in the greenhouse next week. So if you guys learned something new or liked the video, please like the video and or consider subscribing. We drop a new video every Saturday about houseplants. Thanks so much for watching. Happy New Year, everybody. Have a good day.